commentary on the eagle's gift. It was a remarkable sensation for me to examine the quotations drawn from the eagle's gift. I felt immediately the hard coil of the intent of the shamans of ancient Mexico working as vividly as ever. I knew then, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the quotations from this book were ruled by their wheel of time. Further, I knew that this had been the case with everything I had done in the past, such as writing the eagle's gift, and that it is the case with everything I do, as in writing the present book. Since I am at a loss to elucidate this matter, the only option open to me is to accept it in humbleness. The shamans of ancient Mexico did have another cognitive system at work, and from the units of that cognitive system, they still affect me today in the most positive, uplifting fashion. Due to the effort of Florinda Mattis, who engaged me in learning the most elaborate variations of standard shamanistic techniques devised by the shamans of ancient times, such as the recapitulation for instance, I was able to view my experiences with Don Juan with a force I never could have imagined. The corpus of my book, The Eagle's Gift, is the result of such views that I had of Don Juan Mattis. For Don Juan Mattis, to recapitulate meant to relive and rearrange everything of one's life in one single sweep. He never bothered with the minutiae of elaborate variations of that ancient technique. Florinda, on the other hand, had an entirely different meticulousness. She spent months coaching me to enter into aspects of recapitulating that I am to this day at a loss to explain. It is the vastness of the warrior which you are experiencing, she explained. The techniques are there. Big deal. What is of supreme importance is the man using them, and his desire to go all the way with them. To recapitulate Don Juan in Florinda's terms resulted in views of Don Juan of the most excruciating detail and meaning. It was infinitely more intense than talking to Don Juan himself had been. It was Florinda's pragmatism that gave me astounding insights into practical possibilities that were not in the least the concern of the Nagual Juan Mattis. Florinda, being a true woman pragmatist, had no illusions about herself, no dreams of grandeur. She said that she was a plower who could not afford to miss a single turn of the way. A warrior must go very slowly, she recommended, and make use of every available item on the warrior's path. One of the most remarkable items is the capacity we all have as warriors to focus our attention with unwavering force on events lived. Warriors can even focus it on people they have never met. The end result of this deep focusing is always the same. It reconstructs the scene. Whole chunks of behavior, forgotten or brand new, make themselves available to a warrior. Try it. I followed her advice, and of course, I focused on Don Juan, and I remembered everything that had transpired at any given moment. I remembered details that I had no business remembering. Thanks to the work of Florinda, I was able to reconstruct enormous chunks of activity with Don Juan, as well as details of tremendous importance that had bypassed me completely. The spirit of the quotations from the Eagle's Gift was most shocking to me because the quotations revealed the profound emphasis that Don Juan had put on the items of his world, on the warrior's way as the epitome of human accomplishment. That drive had survived his person, and was as alive as ever. Sometimes, I sincerely felt that Don Juan had never left. I got to the point of actually hearing him moving around the house. I asked Florinda about it. She said, "Oh, that's nothing. It's just the Nagual Juan Mattis's emptiness that reaches out to touch you, no matter where his awareness is at the moment." Her answer left me more puzzled, more intrigued, and more despondent than ever. Although Florinda was the closest person to the Nagual Juan Mattis, they were astoundingly different. One thing that they both shared was the emptiness of their persons. They were no longer people. Don Juan Mattis did not exist as a person. But what existed instead of his person was a collection of stories, each of them apropos to the situation he was discussing, didactic stories and jokes that bore the mark of his sobriety and his frugality. Florinda was the same. She had stories upon stories. But her stories were about people. They were like a high form of gossip, or gossip elevated, due to her impersonality, to inconceivable heights of effectiveness and enjoyment. "I want you to examine one man who bears a tremendous resemblance to you," she said one day to me. "I want you to recapitulate him as if you had known him all your life. This man was transcendental in the formation of our lineage. His name was Elias, the Nagual Elias. I call him the Nagual who lost heaven." The story is that the Nagual Elias was reared by a Jesuit priest who taught him to read and write and to play the harpsichord. He taught him Latin. The Nagual Elias could read the scriptures in Latin as fluently as any scholar could. His destiny was to be a priest, but he was an Indian, and Indians in those days did not fit into clerical hierarchies. They were too awesome looking, too dark, too Indian. Priests were from the upper social classes, descendants of Spaniards, with white skin, blue eyes. They were handsome, presentable. The Nagual Elias was a bear in comparison. But he struggled long, kindled by his mentor's promise that God would see that he was accepted into the priesthood. He was the sexton and officer of the church who was in charge of sacred objects, of the church where his mentor was the parish priest, and one day, an actual witch walked in. Her name was Amalia. They say that she was a wild card. Be that as it may, she ended up seducing the poor sexton, who fell so deeply, so hopelessly in love with Amalia that he ended up in the hut of a Nagual man. In time, he became the Nagual Elias, a figure to reckon with, cultured, well-read. It seemed that the niche of Nagual was made for him. It allowed him the anonymity and the effectiveness that was denied him in the world. He was a dreamer, and so good at it that he covered the most recondite places of the universe in a bodiless state. Sometimes he even brought back objects that had attracted his eye because of the lines of their design, objects that were incomprehensible. He called them inventions. He had a whole collection of them. "I want you to focus your recapitulation attention on those inventions," Florinda commanded me. "I want you to end up sniffing them, and feeling them with your hands, although you have never seen them except through what I am telling you now. To do this focusing means to establish a point of reference, as in an algebraic equation in which something is calculated by playing on a third element. You'll be able to see the Nagual one Mattis with infinite clarity, using someone else as a point of corroboration." The corpus of the book The Eagle's Gift is a review in depth of what Don Juan had done to me while he was in the world. The views that I had of Don Juan due to my new recapitulation skills using the Nagual Elias as a point of corroboration were infinitely more intense than any views that I had of him while he was alive. The recapitulation views I was engaged in lacked the warmth of the living, but they had instead the precision and the accuracy of inanimate objects that one can examine to one's heart's content.